All right. So I should have done more research on it, but that's okay. Let me just I should just stick to what I wrote, right? Instead of getting off target. But I want to explain a little bit more. But the virtue of detachment is how we disconnect ourselves from the things that cause us harm, right? So the things of this world. So the things of this world are the things that cause us harm, right? That's how I see it. That's how I reflected on it. So what are the things of this world? Well, you know, the Bible tells us the things of this world, the things of the world during those days consisted of behaviors, habits, attitudes, ideas, and beliefs that without balance will harm someone, self, or others. Right? So perhaps this is why everything is so transferable back then to now, right? Because the things of the world are those things that we chase after, those things that we want, those things that we crave, those things that causes harm to ourselves and other people. Right? And so yeah. Sorry. I'm feeling a little discouraged because I think I'm preaching. I ain't trying to preach. I'm just trying to reflect. This is not preaching. I'm going to post it too. I'm going to post this. Okay. I'm just going to continue to read. Okay. So, prudence. So, as I was reading Galatians 2, I just thought about prudence. I saw prudence, actually. I studied it and looked it up. So, let me not say I came up with it. But I was like, what is this, you know? And so I looked up prudence. So prudence is another virtue. The prudence is the ability to govern and discipline oneself by the use of reason. So it's good judgment in the use of resources. And so what I come to realize is that, well, wait a minute, in order to become prudent, right? Because that's how Paul is actually the writer of this chapter of Galatians 2. Paul is the writer, and so he's described as being prudent, you know. However, in order to become prudent, we have to be able to detach, right? Detachment is what fosters prudence. So Paul, he wrote this letter to the church telling them he's giving them an example of what happened to him. And so basically what's going on here is the church, Paul has found out that the church has been following, they've been, taking on some ways that was not consistent with the teaching of the time and with the word. And so basically the law of Judaism, the laws of the Jews was starting to be practiced over the sacrificial lamb of Christ, right? Because when Christ died, when Jesus died, or Isis died he died for our sins. And so that's when we entered, so I have been taught, the age of grace, right? So now there's no more law. It's not about the law, it's about grace. So let me stick back to my, rambling on and on, 17 minutes. Okay. So, when he went to Jerusalem, he went there with Barnabas and Titus to privately preach the gospel to the Gentiles. So the Gentiles were the adopted folks. They weren't born as blood descendants of the Israelites, but they were adopted as if they were, which gave them the same rights and access as the Israelites, right? So there is still the same, even though one was of blood and the other was through adoption, they all were still considered and loved the same. Okay, so why did he preach privately? Well, Paul preached privately because of who he was preaching to, and also who Paul was in his past. Paul used to persecute the Christians. That's what he did. Paul was a Jew who persecuted other Jewish Christians for believing in Jesus Christ and for not following the law. And so he also did it out of respect for everyone. He knew that there were others who believed in the practice of the law, and he didn't want to offend them. He didn't want to shake up the church, so he addressed a small section of them. And his purpose was not to bring about conflict or confusion, right? So basically in this, Paul detached his feelings. Paul made sure that Paul found out what they were doing, and instead of Paul going there, like, I know how I do, don't take no offense, don't offend me, because you're going to get this. Oh, you're going to get it. And so Paul didn't do that, And then I said, don't offend me or anything of mine or anything I did, because I can be very guarded, but Paul didn't do that. He was mild-tempered. He detached his feelings from it. He didn't react. He acted. He practiced the virtue of detachment. So he knew that there were others who believed in the practice of law, which included circumcisions, and the Gentiles weren't circumcised because they weren't born. They weren't held under Judaic law. They weren't. So Paul chose to instill balance. He was the apostle. He had the authority to call a private meeting, and he had the respect and admiration of the Gentiles and the church of Galatia. So he had everyone's respect. Paul wasn't pulling anybody in secret to sneak. He was pulling them in secret because he had the authority to do that. Paul as an apostle, Paul's position was lined up with his heart, right? So Paul was not one of those people as he had used to be. At one time, Paul used to go around hurting people, and that was when you knew Paul was coming, you would know, you better hope he don't know you're a Christian. At least that's how I think I would be, but he wasn't, now everything had been turned around, when God came into his life and he accepted God into his life, and, I don't even want to say accept it, because how could you not accept an experience like that? And that's another talk of the day. It's like, to not accept an experience like that would mean you would have to accept that you're crazy. So I don't even think Paul had much of a choice given how it was written. But nonetheless, and how quickly he switched up, right? Ooh, that must have been some journey he went on. But nonetheless, so Paul tells the story of circumcision versus conversion to the way of Isis, which is Jesus. That through the law, right. So they was trying, so basically what the people in Galatia were saying was that these Gentiles they needed to be punished because they weren't circumcised. They weren't following the law. Now, these are Jewish Christians saying that. And Peter is like, wait a minute. Hold on a second. The Gentiles weren't under the Jewish law. They were under Christ because they were adopted based on belief and not behavior. So to believe otherwise was an oxymoron. Isis preached to all humans, Greek or Israelite or other. He had no preference who he preached to. He extended his words to whoever would listen. Whoever would listen, he didn't, nowhere does it say black or white people. Nowhere does it say fat or skinny. Nowhere does it say heathen or not. He preached to all, everyone, whoever would listen. His purpose was to heal us, to save us from ourselves. Right? And so we have to remember too, now who was Paul? Paul was a Jew. Now he was circumcised under the law, But like I said, remember Paul was a former prosecutor of the believers of Isis, And he was doing this under the Jewish law, right? So he was under the law persecuting other Christians, which was okay under the law. This was allowed to happen, And so now the very people who now believed in Jesus Christ, and they believed that Jesus was came to preach and to heal and to save the world, that he was the Son of God, they believed this. And they also believed in the law. So they were starting to contradict things and get things all mixed up, same things that people do now. And so he went to correct them. He had the authority to do that. His authority came from God. God gave him authority the day that God stepped into him on his journey and intercepted him on his way to go and kill him some Christians. That's the day he got his authority. He had to go through some stuff to get the courage to walk the truth. Because he's not walking in fear. He's walking in faith. And I know I don't walk in faith a lot. I walk in fear a lot. That's right. So he's walking in faith. What does that mean, walking in faith? Like, now I know what that means. He's walking in faith. He had an experience. Nobody taught him anything in that moment. He wasn't born into it. It wasn't pounded into his head. It wasn't given subliminal messages. He had an experience. He experienced God. An experience so shaken and so magical and so moving that he went to preaching the word to the very people he was trying to murder.